Hi, I'm Gail. Last Sunday, my sister stood up at dinner, pointed at me in front of everyone, and hissed, "You're not fit for this table." They laughed, passed plates, and acted like I didn't exist. But what they didn't know was I'd been watching, quietly collecting every lie, every joke, every stolen piece of my life. And 24 hours later, she was the one calling me in tears. Want to know why? This is tight, shocking, and leaves the viewer desperate to click to hear the story. It's exactly 20 seconds-ish when spoken. I pulled up to Darlene's place just past 6. The lights glowed soft amber through the big windows, and every bush in the front yard was trimmed like it had a monthly appointment. Her driveway was lined with luxury cars, shiny, spotless, proud. I parked a block away. My old Corolla didn't belong there. I held a Tupperware of my oatmeal raisin cookies in both hands, trying not to let the chill seep into my fingers or my spirit. Darlene's front door opened before I knocked. Her smile was picture perfect, just like the house, spotless, staged, and distant. Inside, people chatted and laughed. Coats came off, champagne was poured. I was handed a glass of sparkling water, and my cookies disappeared onto a sideboard, next to a tray of macarons and a cheese board labeled in calligraphy. No one touched my cookies. The dining room was like a spread from a magazine: long table, tall chairs, white linen napkins folded like origami birds. My siblings sat at the far end, loud and familiar, while I slipped into a seat near the middle. They looked good, polished, confident, expensive. I felt like a thrift store sweater in a room full of tailored suits. Growing up, I used to pretend I was invisible. It hurt less than being reminded you didn't matter. Tonight, I didn't have to pretend. As plates passed and wine flowed, I tried to join in. I made a comment about the local election and got a polite smile before someone pivoted to something more interesting. I cracked a small joke about my job, crickets. A cousin turned to refill her glass before I even finished the punchline. They still saw me as the helper, the one who stayed behind to care for Mom while they built lives and ran businesses. Gail the giver, Gail the ghost. I chewed on a bite of dry roast chicken and reminded myself, keep your mouth shut, your back straight, your heart protected. But Darlene? She had other plans. It happened during dessert. I'd just started to tell a story about an elderly patient who crocheted hats for NICU babies. I barely got 2 sentences in before Darlene raised her wine glass and said loud enough to stop every fork in the room, "You're not fit for this table, Gail." Silence. A few awkward laughs fluttered and died in the air. My hands froze around my napkin. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, and not one of them looked angry. Just amused, indifferent, or politely embarrassed. "It's a joke," someone mumbled from down the table. My brother leaned in, gave me a small shrug. "Don't take it personally. You know how Darlene is." I smiled. It was small, tight, and didn't reach my eyes. I took another sip of water so my voice wouldn't betray me. And I didn't say a word. I excused myself a few minutes later, claiming a headache. In the guest bathroom, I gripped the sink so hard my knuckles turned white. The mirror showed a woman holding back tears with every ounce of pride she had left. I bit the inside of my cheek until the sharp pain grounded me. "Don't cry," I told myself. "Don't give them that." A voice from long ago, my father's, whispered through my memory. "Family should lift you up." Not this one. I returned to the table, silent, composed. I laughed when it was expected, ate a few more bites, nodded at stories. Then, when dessert was done and the chatter shifted to plans I wasn't part of, I slipped out the door with a murmured goodbye. At home, the house was quiet. I changed into pajamas, made tea I didn't drink, and sat on the couch staring at the TV I didn't turn on. My phone buzzed. A message from my niece. "I saw what happened. I'm sorry. She was cruel." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then I looked up, at the framed photo of Dad and me from my high school graduation. He had his arm around my shoulder, pride beaming from his face. He used to tell me, "One day, they'll see who you really are." I didn't know it yet, but the next 24 hours would change everything. I woke up still wearing last night's clothes, twisted in a heap on the couch. The house was quiet, save for the ticking wall clock I'd stopped noticing years ago. My body ached in that deep, dull way grief hides inside muscles. The evening kept playing behind my eyes like a broken film reel. Darlene's voice, the clink of silverware after her joke. But what haunted me more was the silence, the kind that doesn't come from peace, but from people choosing not to speak, choosing not to stand beside you. I stood, stiff, moved toward the kitchen out of habit. Everything felt heavier. I opened the fridge. The only thing inside was the container of cookies I'd brought to the dinner. Still untouched. That landed harder than it should have. I took one out, bit into it, and immediately regretted it. Not the taste, just the reminder. I wasn't angry they didn't like them. I was angry they didn't even try. I leaned against the counter and muttered to no one. Maybe they didn't want to escalate things. But that excuse felt thin. Maybe what hurts the most isn't hatred, it's indifference dressed up as politeness. I loaded the dishwasher slowly, mostly for something to do, when I noticed the blinking light on my phone. One unread voicemail. I hadn't checked it yesterday. I pressed play and turned back toward the sink. Hi, sweetheart. It's Mom. I just wanted to check in before dinner tonight. I'm not sure what's going on, but Darlene stopped by this morning and said, well, she said I shouldn't make things uncomfortable, that maybe I should just let the night flow naturally. She said you tend to, get emotional. And I didn't want you to feel like I'm picking sides. I love you, honey. I froze. There it was, clear as day. That dinner wasn't spontaneous cruelty. It was staged, orchestrated, and I was the act they all came to enjoy. I hit replay, turned the volume up. In the background of Mom's voice, I heard it. Faint, but unmistakable. You know how Gail gets, Mom. Just don't stir anything up, all right? Darlene. I stared at the wall. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't when I whispered, they planned that dinner like a performance. I was just the punchline. I sat down at the table, phone still in hand. What else had been scripted? I thought back to that meeting last fall, about Mom's long-term care. Darlene had told me, you don't need to say anything, it's mostly financial stuff. So I'd stayed quiet. But now, it was clear. My silence wasn't asked for, it was expected, like my voice was optional unless they needed something sorted, cleaned, or forgiven. I pulled out an old photo album from under the side table, dust catching in the light as I flipped through the pages. There they were, Christmases, birthdays, vacations I wasn't invited to. Darlene always in the center. Me off to the side, if I was even in the frame. Then I found one, us as kids. Sitting in a cardboard box we'd turned into a spaceship, side by side, laughing. I touched the edge of the photo and asked the air, when did you stop seeing me as your sister, Darlene, and start seeing me as a threat? My phone buzzed again. It was my niece. I know they were wrong. You didn't deserve that. She was the only one who made eye contact during that awful dinner. The only one whose gaze wasn't full of pity or apathy. I leaned back, closed my eyes. A memory surfaced, me at 12, trying to share something at the table. Interrupted, talked over, laughed at. They didn't just silence me last night. They'd been doing it for decades, and somehow, I'd let them. I grabbed an old notebook from the drawer. Pages yellowed, spine cracked. I wrote one word in thick, angry strokes across the page. Enough. I stood, walked to my bookshelf, and pulled down the binder labeled Mom's Care Plan. Every note, every appointment, every prescription, compiled by me. Darlene took it to the facility last time, claimed credit like she'd done it all. Typical. I started organizing everything. Dates, phone records, emails. Not for revenge, not yet. I needed clarity. I needed truth. If they thought they buried me at that table, I said aloud, placing the binder flat on the kitchen table. They forgot. I was the one holding the shovel. And just when I thought they couldn't go any lower, the phone rang again. The morning light at my office was sterile, bright enough to see every line on my face, every doubt behind my eyes. I slid into my usual desk before anyone else, pretending the world hadn't cracked open the night before. I filed emails, drank lukewarm coffee, attempted conversation with a half smile. My mind kept drifting back to Mom's voicemail. That recorded warning from Darlene replayed in my head again and again, like a needle stuck in a record. A coworker stopped by my desk. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded quickly. "Just didn't sleep well," I said, voice firm. If I softened, she would see what I was trying to hide. I glanced at the framed photo I keep at my desk, my niece holding my hand on a sunny day. She was one of the few who ever looked at me as someone. Then, I forced myself back into focus. At mid-morning, I walked toward the break room. My steps echoed in the hallway. I felt exposed. As I passed the open door to the marketing office, laughter cut through the noise, familiar laughter, and then I heard Darlene's voice, clear over speaker. She just sat there like some wounded squirrel. I was this close to telling her to leave. I froze in the corridor, hidden. The mocking tone was casual, cruel. Darlene's companion laughed. What did she expect? You don't get respect by just showing up. My heart pounded. Betrayal flooded me like frostbite. I felt disgust, hot and cold, burning all at once. I stepped back, almost stumbled, and pressed myself against the wall, invisible. I retreated to the supply room down the hall and shut the door quietly. Hands shaking, I leaned against the wall, trying to breathe in and out without crying. Rage simmered beneath the hurt. This wasn't family tension, it was calculated cruelty. A slow burn turning into a wildfire inside me. They've done this before. They practice it. I gripped the edge of the shelf. Tears threatened, but I swallowed them down. I don't need to be kind to them anymore, I thought. I considered barging in, exposing Darlene's voice to every person in that office, but instead I held back, strategy over spectacle. At lunchtime, I slipped upstairs to the rooftop garden, a sliver of sky buried between towers. I sat on a bench, legs tucked in, notebook open. I revisited all the stories I told myself. Family cares, let it go. They meant well. Each belief felt like a chain now. Who made those rules anyway? And who did they protect? I remembered my therapist. Staying silent doesn't make you peaceful. It makes you complicit. I realized those words were meant for this moment. I wasn't passive anymore. I was discovering that I'd been groomed to accept less. I opened the family group chat on my phone. All those jokes, photos, inside comments, they were meant to marginalize. I scrolled. My name, my face, always in the punchline. Without hesitation, I deleted the chat from my phone. Back at my desk, I accessed my private folder, personal records. I created a new one, timeline of manipulations. Every memory, every slight, every email or comment I saved across years went in there. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt solid. If they thought I'd keep pretending forever, they misjudged who I've become. And as I sat there reorganizing my life's evidence, my phone buzzed again, a reminder that truth has a way of spilling over. The invite came quietly, text from my brother's wife. "We're all grabbing brunch, you should come." My first instinct was to ignore it, but something inside me pulled at that option. Part curiosity, part resolve. I spent the drive rehearsing calm lines, not to start a fight, but to name a truth. Therapist's voice echoed. Sometimes you don't need to prove them wrong, just prove yourself right. I parked near the restaurant, took a deep breath, folded the note I'd tucked in my purse. I slipped inside like someone with dignity, not desperation. At the table, the air was scented with syrup and chatter. Greetings were exchanged, light pleasantries floated, but tension lurked beneath. Darlene sat across from me, pretending ease. I leaned forward, voice gentle. "It's funny how we remember things." The room hushed. Sometimes you only find out what people think when they think you're not listening. Her smile narrowed. I kept my seat. No shouting, just direct. I let the weight sit there, silence stretched like thin ice. I met Darlene's eyes, level gaze. The table remained quiet, eyes flickered, forks paused. No one intervened. I forced a polite smile, but inside the realization sharpens. They heard me and chose silence. That hurt more than any insult. I thought, Have they always watched rather than cared? Maybe they believe offense without reaction is acceptable. Generational rules. Don't start drama. They taught me. But tonight, I decide this ends. I will not fold when they expect me to. I reached for the folded note and placed it gently on the table. I said, I wrote this in case I lost my nerve. I didn't. But I'm done pretending. Heads turned. A few held their breath. Eyes darted. No one spoke. I stood and left my half-full mimosa behind. At the door, my brother called out, Wait, don't make this bigger than it is. Quietly, I replied, It's been big. You all just shrunk yourselves to avoid facing it. Then I walked to my car, calm, certain. Later, in my kitchen, I watched the note burn over the sink. I didn't need to speak those lines tonight. They'd already landed. My phone lit up. A message from someone I didn't expect. I was proud of you today. I looked in the mirror and saw someone changed, someone done with waiting. The silence I left on that table spoke louder than anything I could have said. I stepped into my apartment, heavy with silence. The door clicked shut, and I peeled off my clothes like armor. Not dramatic, just necessary. My shoes thudded across the floor, collected dust, left to lie there. I walked to the window, coffee receipt limp in hand, and watched the city lights flicker through the dusk. Traffic hummed distant, oblivious. I sat there, shoulders slack, and replayed the brunch. No one stood. No one defended me. It was like I delivered truth to a table of actors. I whispered to empty space. My fingers hovered over my laptop as I opened the email draft to my therapist. Subject line already typed, I think I hit my wall today. But the words didn't come. Hours later, my phone chime jolted me awake. Not from sleep, but from the aftershock of that meeting. My niece had texted, You should have seen what they posted right after brunch. I stared at the screen. Moments ago, I thought I understood everything. Then I saw it, a screenshot of a meme posted in a private family group chat. My face, distorted, cartoonish, captioned, When you think grace makes you righteous. Humiliation wrapped in priorities that I'd never been told existed. My stomach knotted. That chat had been going on for years, and I had never been invited. I'd been the show, never part of the audience. While my silence was my retreat, theirs was construction, cruelty built in layers. In a daze, I pulled my journal from under the cushion. I wrote, I'm sorry, out of habit, out of reflex. Then I stopped. Why was I writing this? For them. For me. I reread old entries. Not once did they ask me to apologize. Yet I always did. That ends tonight. I tore the apology letter, then shredded it into smaller bits. The act felt cleansing. On a new page, I wrote, If you are the only one holding peace together, you're not keeping peace. You're silencing yourself. That line echoed in my head like a verdict. Over the next hours, I didn't cry. I cataloged. I opened old emails, downloaded texts, flagged every moment they'd twisted my words back at me. I screenshot conversations where I was blamed unjustly. I labeled folders, proof, patterns, boundaries. This was not revenge. This was reclamation. I printed the family tree photograph I'd hidden. I circled names. Some got questions, some got nothing. Before sleep, I set reminders. Call lawyer, email HR for Monday time off. Then I shut off my phone, for the first time in years, and stared at the ceiling in darkness. The silence felt different. It no longer bound me. It baptized me. They wanted the version of me who bends. That's gone. What comes next? I don't even recognize yet. The shadows in my home office stretched long as the afternoon light waned. I sat behind my desk, folder open, eyes scanning the pages of my timeline of manipulations. Each entry felt heavier than the one before. The dinners, the whispers, the small indignities I dismissed. I noted names beside words like too emotional, needy, oversensitive. My chest tightened. Then my phone buzzed. A group chat notification. My heart jumped. I hadn't expected that. I opened the chat. My face stared back at me from memes, mocking captions, jokes at my expense. Comments like, Maybe she'll learn how to speak next time, floated there. Casual cruelty. The people in that room last night, they laughed. Now here it was, painted online for their amusement. I screenshot them all, evidence born of pain. I uploaded one to my secure vault. A cartoon of me crying, eyes exaggerated. Then I watched a message pop up privately from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. That's awful. I had no idea. Hope flickered. For once, someone saw me outside their frame. I replied simply, "You saw the real picture tonight." Then the group chat lit up again. Darlene posted, "She only signs checks. We built the legacy." The tone was theatrical, dramatic, sharp. I studied each word, built the legacy, as though my contributions were not just ignored, but erased. My fingers hovered over the reply button. Then I opened my notes and typed, "I built part of this, and I didn't ask permission." Something changed in me then. This wasn't a battle to prove them wrong. It was a reckoning to prove myself right. I pulled printed proof, emails, screenshots, binders I'd hidden away. I carried them to the small conference room in my place, laid them across a polished table. I sent a message to the immediate family. I'd like to talk, tonight, at my place. No threats, no drama, just a summons. My husband looked at me with concern. "Don't go in half prepared," he said. I nodded. And I would not let them claim ignorance tonight. I left the room to reset the lights, open the curtains. When I returned, the table was transformed. I walked in and felt the shift. When they arrive, they will step into my arena. Then my phone buzzed. Darlene's name. Message. "What are you doing? Don't make this ugly." I paused, smiled grimly. I typed, "It's already ugly. Now I'll make it visible." When I stepped back into the living room, the table stood there. Evidence spread, invitation clear. The air quivered. Tonight, the table won't ignore what I've always been. I stood in my living room before they arrived, feeling the weight of the moment settling over every piece of furniture. I placed the evidence, photos, printouts, tablets with screenshots, on the dining table, aligned neatly, not in chaos. The lamps were dimmed but warm, chairs arranged, not in confrontation, but in invitation. This wasn't a trap. It was a stage set for truth. When the doorbell rang, I straightened my shoulders. They entered, some cautious, some defiant. Darlene's smile was tight. Quinn's eyes flickered worry. Others shifted in their seats. I greeted them with calm. "We're all here. Let's stop dancing around what's true." The silence that followed was thick. Utensils clinked. Breaths held. In that hush, I thought, they believe I'm broken. What they don't realize is, I've been listening all along. Darlene took a tentative step forward. "I never meant for this to turn into something ugly," she began, voice soft but quavering. Before she could twist it further, I interrupted without raising my tone. "Your joke last night was neither harmless nor private." I picked up a tablet, opened the folder of memes and screenshots, and showed them. A wave of shock passed the room. My photos, my face, mucked and mocked. Darlene went pale. Forks dropped. No defense. No intervention. Silence thundered. "You thought I wouldn't see. You thought I'd stay quiet," I said. The absence of a word from them became louder than any apology might have been. I reached into my folder and pulled out the original property deed, my name on it, with dates stamped before any forged claim ever existed. Then I held up the fake version. They circulated it within the family circle. I explained the differences: signatures, timestamps, annotations. Darlene tried to object with a claim of counsel, but I countered. They thought they destroyed my reputation. They forgot my name was already on the papers. Eyes flicked between me and her fake deeds. Some flushed, others swallowed. In that moment, the facade cracked. Quinn looked away. A cousin cleared her throat and muttered, "I didn't know. I'm sorry." I nodded, not in triumph but in reckoning. I said, "You all had a choice. See me or decide not to. Tonight, you chose." I walked through the list. Group chat jokes, silent dinners, exclusion. I pointed to faces, to moments. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I enumerated. My voice held steady. The room trembled. Then I stepped back. Let silence reclaim space. I walked slowly toward the door. Before I crossed the threshold, I paused. I said, "It's time they understood I'm not the one afraid of speaking." I opened the door and left them staring into emptiness, the room reverberating with what I had left behind. I left the table, but I didn't leave the truth behind. I moved through the house with intention, not hesitation. Every chair had its place, every light dimmed just enough to calm nerves, but not soften truth. I laid out the documents again, emails, screenshots, transcripts, then stood back and inhaled deeply. No clutter, no confusion, no more excuses. I looked at the room like it was a courtroom, because tonight, it was. I repeated the rule in my head. No interruptions, no ignoring, full attention. They started arriving just after sunset, the same uneasy hellos, the stiff hugs. Darlene gave me that smirk she always saves for when she thinks she has the upper hand. Quinn wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't flinch. When we were all in place, I walked to the center. My hands stayed steady. My voice, clear. "Tonight," I said, "I don't want us to talk about what you think I've felt. I want us to look at what I endured, not for attention, but for peace." No one responded. Good. I wasn't looking for a reaction. I was demanding presence. I held a printed thread of messages in one hand, redacted in black ink where it didn't matter, exposed where it did. "You assumed my silence meant surrender?" I began. But it wasn't surrender. It was surveillance. I turned to Darlene. "Every message you sent to avoid dinners, every comment that mocked, every shrug you offered when I asked why I wasn't told about birthdays." I laid the documents down one by one. Some turned away. Some stared like they'd seen a ghost. "You don't get to act surprised now." The silence rippled again. Not empty this time, heavy. They weren't quiet because they had nothing to say. They were quiet because they were caught. I looked at all of them, calm, steady. Then I said what had been sitting at the edge of my throat for too many years. "I will not continue in any room that refuses to see me." I gathered my papers slowly. Every scrape of the chair echoed through the room. Darlene barked out, "You're making a scene!" I stopped, turned around, and said, "I've been the silent scene my whole life. Now you're finally seeing it." I walked out. Behind me, gasps. The chairs scraped as they adjusted, but no one followed. No one stopped me. And I didn't look back. In the quiet of my car, the weight of it hit. Not grief, not guilt. Something else. Like breaking through the surface of water I didn't realize I'd been drowning in. I breathed, in, out, in again. My phone lit up. A message from Lacey, my cousin, the one who always had half a foot in both worlds. I didn't even open it before typing back, "Tonight changed everything." She didn't reply. I drove home slowly, parked out front, and sat on the porch for a long while. The city lights flickered like some silent jury still deliberating. Another notification buzzed. Darlene, in the group chat. "Family meeting canceled." Below it, I noticed something. Vera's name was missing. Not just offline. Removed. That was their next move. Erase the witnesses. One by one. I typed into the group thread. "You removed me, not the truth." I didn't wait for the response. I sat back, eyes on the night. They can delete my name from a chat, but I wrote myself into every single line of this story. 1 week passed. That night, the one that changed everything, echoed more in its silence than any shouting ever could have. No one called. No one showed up at my door. Just a handful of vague Facebook posts with smiling brunch plates and hollow quotes about healing through grace. I sat on my porch the morning after, coffee cooling in my hand, and I remember thinking, so this is what standing up feels like. Cold, still, quiet, not triumphant, not cinematic, just honest. I scrolled through old photos, Christmases where I was the one behind the camera, graduations where they cropped me out, smiles that now felt like smudges, For years, I'd convinced myself that being included, barely, was better than being alone, that their silence was peace, that peace meant love. But silence was just a pause button on pain. I deleted the group chat, felt my thumb hesitate on the screen, then pressed down harder than I needed to, like I was sealing a decision with more than just tech. Mid-afternoon, a knock, not urgent, not timid. I opened the door. Vera stood there, eyes red, holding a plain white envelope. No hello, no small talk. She looked down, then back up at me. I should have said something years ago. She handed me the envelope. It had weight, not just physical. I could feel it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Every loop and curve of her handwriting strained to stay steady. She'd seen the jokes, heard the whispers, watched me be cornered and stayed quiet. Not because she hated me, but because she didn't know how to stand up, even when she wanted to. She didn't cry. Neither did I. We just sat in it, like two women who knew the cost of truth, but also its worth. When she left, I didn't feel lighter. I felt more rooted, more known. That evening, I walked to the cafe Grandma and I used to love. They'd kept the old booths, the chipped mugs, the lemon scones she used to sneak into her purse. I sat by the window, pulled out my journal, and wrote, "Family doesn't always share your DNA. Sometimes they just share your values." I called Eula, asked her if she wanted to head up to the cabin for a weekend away. Just the two of us. No stories, no explaining. Yes, she said, like she'd been waiting for me to remember my own life. Later that week, I booked therapy again, signed up for a yoga class, bought new curtains, not because I needed change, because I deserved space that hadn't been stained by guilt. I remembered something my therapist once told me. Don't wait for others to return the love you keep giving. Reclaim it. So I wrote an essay, titled it, "The Day I Became My Own Witness," submitted it to a local magazine. Didn't expect them to publish it. Didn't need them to. That night, I sat back on my porch, eyes tracing the stars. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no teary reuniting, just the sound of cicadas and breath. I wasn't waiting anymore. My phone buzzed, a voicemail, Darlene. Her voice was quiet, even shaking. "I'm confused, Gail. I'm hurting." I didn't hit play again, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood some silences are meant to be sat with. And this one, it wasn't mine anymore. Let them sit with it this time. I've sat with it long enough. As I stood up to head inside, another buzz, Aunt Eloise. Her message just said, "You were braver than all of us. Coffee soon?" I smiled, closed the door behind me, and whispered to myself, maybe endings are just places where the right people begin to find you.